Will India's pharma exports be hit? India's pharmaceutical exports are projected to double from something like $27 billion last year to reach about $65 billion by 2030 and beyond. Now, of the current figure, that's about $28 billion, roughly 31% or less than a third goes to the United States, making the US the top importer of Indian pharmaceuticals. Not surprisingly, it is or likely to be in the crosshairs of the Trump administration, given that India is a net exporter. A Bain and Company report said recently that India currently ranks 11th in pharmaceutical export values and could obviously grow this substantially. The largest component of India's pharma exports at $19 billion, or 70% of total exports, are generic formulations, which are expected to grow to about $190 billion by 2047. Now, I reached out to Dr. Viranchi Shah, spokesperson and until recently president of the Indian Drug Manufacturers Association. He's also a member of Pharmexil, the Pharmaceuticals Export Promotion Council of India. I began by asking him how the industry was gearing up for the new Trump wars.
I believe that the industry is watching this news very cautiously. And I don't think there is one, let's say, opinion that has been made so far for several reasons. Number one, we don't know if the pharmaceutical industry will have tariffs on it or not, because pharmaceuticals are life-saving drugs, right? And they do impact the availability and accessibility of drugs in the US as well as in all the other markets. So usually governments are not very hard or very strong in terms of tariffs or barriers for such kinds of life-saving or critical imports. So we are not very sure whether India will be subjected to tariff or not. One, and second, even if there is something that does happen, whether pharmaceuticals will be a part of it or not. But a general sense is that almost 40% of the generics sold in the United States originate in India, and we play a very constructive role as far as the healthcare system of the US and several other countries are concerned. So hopefully we will not be subjected to tariffs. However, if suppose it happens, one of the impact that I see is that suppose we consider the impact on the APIs, because APIs is something where India and certain other countries like China and other players do play a part. In such cases, it will then have to be seen what is the difference between the tariffs on India versus the other significant players in the same product. And most likely, even in such event, if the tariffs on India are lower than tariffs on some other countries, even in that case, in my personal opinion, we are here to gain, because the other source of API would be that much more affected as compared to an API coming from India. So that would be in a favor in a way, hypothetically, if this is what happens.
So, a couple of questions. So, first is like President Trump has been referring to in the case of, let's say, industries like automotive, where they want to go after steel and aluminum, where there is scope for domestic manufacturing, or at least the feeling is that they can substitute with domestic manufacturing. Is there domestic manufacturing capacity or the possibility of it in the US for these kind of categories of drugs, including generics?
Very limited. But just to give you a comparison of one of the companies I know, and the cost of converting 1,000 tablets, for example, from an API to a tablet, doing it in the same company's plant in India was approximately about $4.50. And doing the same product with the same ingredient, same equipment in the US was in excess of $30. That was a comparison I know about a company which is based on a dependable data. So, kind of cost escalations that go, then only for very high value products, it may get, let's say, more competitive to do it, or at least not raise any issues when you transfer that product from India or any other country to the US.
Okay, let me put it differently. I know we are sitting here in India, but how price sensitive is the market? So let's say we are exporting $27 billion worth of products. Assuming there are, let's say, 10% tariffs, the value of that becomes, let's say, $30 billion landed on a very rough basis in the US. What is the price sensitiveness of the US consumer to this category, in your understanding?
Let us understand it. The price competitiveness, the US is a very different dynamics. There are certain major players as far as distribution is concerned, about 3 or 4 players really major in terms of their reach and size. And then there are a set of importers and pharmacy benefit managers, and it's slightly different from what we have in India. So that simple comparison cannot, but I can tell you as far as the importers are concerned, how does that translate into a retail price is a very different game. It depends on several factors. But as far as the imports are concerned, definitely they are price sensitive. We have to compare of what could be the cost of doing the same in the US, or is there any other alternative supplier that can be more efficient, more cheaper, faster than India. So at least in the immediate or short run, I don't see any other player which has the kind of capabilities that India can offer.
And US is roughly 30% of the market of all pharmaceutical exports from India, or one third. What are the opportunities like in the rest of the world? How is that looking to the industry right now?
So if you see consistently, for example, I think the last year's growth in export was in excess of 9% as far as pharmaceuticals was concerned. And we have a similar trend if you compare. See, COVID was like 21, 22 was a different because everywhere there was a supply chain and there were unrealistic growths and changes. But if you see for the last 5 or 10 years, apart from removing that COVID period, our exports has consistently grown. Our last couple of years, it has been in excess of 8-9%. Currently, when the growth in exports is facing certain challenges in terms of overall numbers for the country, pharmaceutical still continues to perform well. So I believe that there is therefore a very positive outlook for the international demand for pharmaceuticals from India.
Right. And are there any other trends that you're seeing? Last question as well. Any other trends that you're seeing in 2025 or this year, apart from, let's say, the where all the attention is going to be, which is exposed to the US?
See, US is actually a trendsetter, right? So we must understand that if US is tariff, so US does certain thing not only in pharma for any other commodity, there will be countries who will try to emulate. Now, everybody will not be able to do because the kind of size and scale of US and the importance it carries in global trade is so much higher. So, for example, another country in the Africa, if they want to do something that US does, while there could be a political wish probably, but in terms of actual execution, they may not be able to do. But definitely, there will be local noises that will come forward and say, why don't we also add 10% in import duty or do this or do that? So those kind of challenges will continue, in my opinion, in 2025. But how much it actually translates into an impact on business, especially in pharmaceuticals, I'm not too sure.
Right. Dr. Shah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.